Welcome to The Big Picture. I'm Phil Arno. Healthcare, pharmaceuticals, supplements, that's a big industry these days. It's a far cry from when I was growing up and Dr. Yellen would trot up to the house with his little black bag and give us a couple of pills and say, call me in the morning. Doctors, healthcare, the whole system has evolved and changed. I mean, you wouldn't recognize it from when I was growing up. Now, is that a good thing or a bad thing? People are living longer, they're remaining young longer, and they're enjoying life more than they did in the past. The life expectancy has gone up. But healthcare is a trillion-dollar industry. Anything that basically generates that much revenue gets complicated. Decisions are made not so much because of what's good for people as what's good for the profit margin and the formula. It's a complicated subject, but with me today is a chiropractor by the name of Domenico, and he's going to discuss the healthcare industry and your health and what chiropractic is all about. This is going to be interesting. And welcome to the show, Dr.
Phil, it's my
Domenico.
pleasure. My privilege and pleasure. Thank you.
As I said in my intro, healthcare is a huge profit-making enterprise. It's evolved over the last generation or two. It's gotten vastly different than when I was growing up. Is this something that is a mixed bag because of the amount of money that's involved in taking care of everybody's health?
That's absolutely the case. Okay, when you talk about health care, there's a differentiation between health care and sick care. What we currently have in the country is Big Pharma is directing a lot of what we call health care with pharmaceuticals and medication. Pfizer last year made $100 billion. What you're talking about is the incredible amount of profit with regard to, quote, healthcare. In chiropractic, we've talked about healthcare for generations, 120 years. Eating well, exercising, not intoxicating the body as Big Pharma would have you do. Last night, interesting, there's so many things that came out in the last 24 hours that are pertinent to this show that I couldn't believe it. Everything from covering up information about the COVID vaccine to last night, Ozempic commercial came on, touting the new weight loss drugs. And right after, an attorney came on and said, we are suing the makers of Ozempic. So what you're talking about is the tremendous assault, if I may put it that way, on society with pharmaceuticals and drugs for $100 billion, Pfizer alone. That's an awful lot of money. There's a major differentiation between health care and sick care, treating diseases, treating illnesses, treating injury with drugs and surgery. That isn't health care. That's crisis intervention. And for the most part, that's what we have in this country today, crisis intervention. Chiropractic and health care is a far cry from that. All those things that I mentioned, eating well, exercising, not intoxicating your body, learning to manage stress. I think our country's under a little bit of stress right now. And of course, last but certainly not least, is chiropractic care. If I may, and I don't mean to monopolize all the time, chiropractic is a science, an art, and philosophy. It's exceedingly simple. So simple even I can understand it. The brain and spinal cord control the body, central nervous system, through nerves that exit from between the bones of the spine. Brain, spinal cord, and the electrical current that comes from the brain that makes everything in your body work, from wiggling your toes to going to the bathroom. That electrical control from brain to cord to body has a pathway. If you interfere with nerves, whether it's alcohol or drugs or stress, all other types of interference in the nervous system, the body doesn't function well. Chiropractic is the most simple and easiest thing in the world to understand. When the spine misaligns and pressures nerves, the electrical flow between brain and body is interfered with. Then you get sick, then muscles don't work, bowel problems, all kinds of issues. If you keep the pressure off the nervous system with regular chiropractic adjustments, aligning the spine, it's that simple. Our professor said, people won't get well because of you, they'll get well in spite of you. When you take pressure off the nervous system, the body's electrical control, which controls everything, I mean everything, is free of interference and the body functions. That's all chiropractic is.
Well, you know, I've always been of the opinion that the human body has been designed to take care of itself, basically to heal itself, to fight off entities, viruses, and microbes. People get sick basically because there are things that you introduce into your body that prevent you from having that natural ability to fight off all the things that are there attacking you.
Self-organizing organism. Okay, you're talking about the innate function of the body. Innate means the nature-given, God-given, whatever you want to call it. Innate is the body's ability to heal itself, to replace tissue, to replace blood, to replace bone structure. Innate means you take two cells. This is probably my best example of innate. One from a man and one from a woman, okay? And you create a baby in 9 months. That's a hell of a trick, okay? That's innate. It regulates temperature, regulates the dilation and constriction of the pupils. Take food, eat it. It's broken down to its most basic components, taken where it needs to be placed, and healing and nutrition for the body, and then it's eliminated. That's innate. You can interfere with innate in many ways, as you said, excessive alcohol and drug use, stress, all the things that chiropractic is about, maintaining optimal health because you support the innate. There's a very interesting concept, the germ theory. I know that we had a discussion prior to, but the germ theory. Innate in our body's immune system is the main reason we get ill or we don't get ill. If the germ theory were true, no one would be around to believe it. That's the chiropractic version. It is not the agent, meaning the bacteria or the virus, which is the primary cause or the reason we get sick. It's the resistance of the host that matters most. If your immune system's good, and this includes this circumstance with COVID, this fiasco that we just went through, if the immune system's good, COVID is not anything to be concerned about. Viruses, bacteria, a whole host of these agents. The agent, they're around us, in us, on us. You have staph, pneumococcal bacteria right here, E. coli from the rectal area right here, all kinds of cold viruses. If it was the agent, the virus or bacteria that got us ill or got us sick, we'd all be sick. No one would be around to believe the germ theory because we'd all be dead. But that's not the primary issue. It's the resistance of the host which matters most. Thank you, Dr. Salk. So when you look at healthcare, the germ theory, oh, there's germs all around. I get the biggest kick out when I go to the store and they're cleaning off the handle of the cart and they're cleaning, washing their hands and all that. Is there anything wrong with that? No, there's nothing wrong with that at all. But the minute you pick up a box of Cheerios, you're going to be exposed to every one of those viruses and bacteria. They're around us all the time. So the main point is your immune system needs to be nurtured and maintained in order to stay healthy.
You know, one of the things that people should take into consideration, and this goes to your point, you know, you could be in a classroom with 40 people,
right,
and 2 or 3 of the people have a bad cold,
right,
okay, and they interact with the other 40 people. Out of that classroom of 40 people, if it was just the microbes and the germs, every one of those 40 people would be infected. But you walk away from that class, and days later, out of the 40 people, maybe 1 or 2 catch a cold from the people who were, you know, coughing and sneezing.
You know, Philly, you're
whatever.
Pretty sharp. I could swear to God that you're a chiropractic philosopher. Okay.
Well,
really?
So, you know, the other 35 or 36 or whatever people who didn't get sick, they didn't get sick for a reason. They resist that particular virus or microbe, and they're either living a healthier life or genetically they're, you know, built better to resist in particular thing.
Am I on? Yes, I'm holding up the finger. It's the resistance of the host which matters most in the cause or prevention of disease. Right. It is not the agent. Now, all due respect to my friends in the medical community or scientific research community, there are certain virulent viruses or bacteria that are so dangerous, which there's certain governments working on a lot of that stuff, not the least. Did I mention Hunan, China? However, that is nothing compared to what is out there for whatever purposes these things are being developed. The vast majority, all the different viruses and bacteria, the cold virus, the flu viruses, COVID, all this, it's irrelevant. They're not relevant if your resistance is high. Why are some people sick all the time? You ever notice somebody, they're coughing and sneezing all the time? Okay. I guarantee you, can I guarantee, as a chiropractor, as a doctor, you cannot guarantee anything. You can assure people, which I do all the time. But the fact of the matter is, I assure you that if your resistance is high, you have very little to worry about. These people who are sick all the time, either excessive alcohol, stress, never underestimate stress as far as the abuse of the nervous system. Stress is terrible, it affects every part of the body, but I digress. All these factors that maintain health, chiropractic, healthcare, mainstream medicine, drugs, and surgery. There's a major difference. Crisis, if I fracture my leg trying to find this place, it took me a half an hour to find this place. I want a sign out in the back door. You didn't think I was going to let you guys up.
We'll take care of it.
I want a terrific orthopedic surgeon, and depending upon the type of fracture, and the medication to quell my pain. But am I going to go to them to get health care? No. Okay. So bottom line to the whole thing, health care and sick care are two different things. Resistance of the host, which matters most, not the agents in the majority of cases.
Well, we're just about out of time for this segment. When we come back, I want to talk to you about some of the decisions that are made by government and regulators. You know, COVID had, we've just been through a horrendous situation, and a lot of decisions were made. And I think the trust level has gone to an all-time low. So we'll talk about that when we come back. So stay tuned. It's going to be interesting and food for thought. We'll be right back. Welcome back to The Big Picture. My guest is Dr. Gus Domenico, who is a chiropractor here locally, and we're talking all things healthcare and the industry that takes care of us with drugs, pharmaceuticals, and so on. I saw a documentary recently, and there was a member of pharma who was interviewed, and he basically said, look, we're not there and we're not interested in curing anyone. Okay, we are there to give you pills that you take every day to keep you alive. Because if we cure you, we're out of business. There's no profit in that. Pharma is there to continue to give you drugs and supplements that will make you feel better, not necessarily cure anything that you're going through. And decisions are being made that kind of go counter to what the average person would think, well, this is going to help me in the best way possible. It's not necessarily the case.
It is not the case. You have a conflict between profit and health. When there's a conflict between profit and health, when you talk about Pfizer's $100 billion, and there's at least 9 other major pharmaceutical companies, and the average income from them is $50 billion a year. So 100 and then 9 times 5, 45, you got $500 billion worth of income, and then the other ones that you mentioned, which make it $1 trillion. When there's a conflict between these two things, usually if you want to follow the money trail, that's usually where it goes. But it becomes even more complicated than that. Politics and the political situation, political correctness, the money, it's all hand in hand. When you look at what happened during COVID and the quelling of some very serious issues, there's a very interesting expose Cheryl Atkinson did on a young girl. Are you aware of this? Maddie D. Gary is her name. Well, her parents were big time into vaccinations and vaccine. And they approached the family and they said, we want to have a trial on the kids. They said, oh, fine, we'll try the COVID-19 trial. And she ended up in a fetal position. I urge everyone out there to look this up, to Google this. Maddie DeGarry, Cheryl Atkinson, the interview on the effect of COVID-19. This is a pre-dispensing or pre-authorizing trial. A little girl ended up, if you see it, it's disheartening. They knew it. They knew ahead of time, and there are many, many lawsuits going on right now because of the mandates that the government imposed on people. I can't get too controversial here because, there's a lot of people out there who'll be good looking for me when I get out of the parking lot.
Controversy is our middle name. So.
Oh, it is?
Yes.
Okay, then I'll unload. It's a tragedy as to what happened. Here's the interesting part. When you see that expose, your heart sinks when you see the little girl in a fetal position with a feeding tube, and they found out that there's serious side effects. But they produced the vaccine and they dispensed it anyway. You know as well as I that children, for all intents and purposes, this is the scientific research. Oh, by the way, am I on that camera right there? I would like people to fact check me and see if what I'm saying is correct or not correct. The government right now is hiring attorneys through the Justice Department to represent thousands and thousands of people who in fact had serious and dangerous side effects from COVID. Was it publicized? No. Matter of fact, remember I told you that this morning and last night, on the news this morning, the administration came out with information concerning Amazon. They had them opposed to publishing books on COVID reactions. So what you're saying is absolutely true, that in fact when there's a conflict between public health and finance and money and political reasons, that usually health ends up losing, and you see that with the COVID situation. This Maddie DeGarry situation it's said, but money, they knew ahead of time. They knew, but when you talk about billions of dollars, you're right, public trust has been lost. And the community at large, I have patient after patient after patient that comes into my office, blood clots, myocarditis, pericarditis, a lot of people, but you didn't hear anything about it.
They treated everybody during COVID like they were clones of each other. Like everybody was the same. Everybody had to take a vaccine, otherwise you couldn't travel, you couldn't do this, you couldn't get a job. Mandates, in some cases.
Yes.
And everybody was treated like, they were exactly the same as everybody else. I heard a story about the very first part of COVID that broke out on a cruise ship. And there were, I think it was like 3,000 people on the cruise ship. There was an outbreak of COVID, and of the 3,000 people on the ship, something like 200 of them got infected. The interesting part is they locked everybody into their cabins, and the infection rate was, just a fraction of the people that were there, but they had all interacted with each other to begin with. And they kept these people at sea in lockdown, basically. They wouldn't let them come back on shore because of the COVID thing. And then the 3,000 people overall, they were not affected whatsoever, even though they had interacted with all the other people who were infected. And the doctor that was talking said, if we had just treated the population like we treated that cruise ship, the 3,000 people were exposed, 200 people actually came down with COVID. The huge majority of people are not going to get COVID if they're exposed because their resistance, as we talked about earlier, prevents it. They're in better shape to resist that virus.
Okay, so if we
would have taken the small percentage of people, and we could have tested this, that were susceptible to the disease, and the people who were at most risk, the sick, the elderly, and treated them in one way, but treated the general population in another way. None of that lockdown stuff, none of the 2 years that we went through with COVID that disrupted everything, none of that should have happened.
You're exactly correct, okay? Remember, again, it's the resistance of the host which matters most. Healthy people had very little to fear from COVID infections. Matter of fact, COVID is right on this chair right now, and I'm not going to get it because I have a good resistance, okay? That's number one, okay? The information that was dispensed was everybody's going to die, the fear tactic. Oh, you're all going to die, your children are going to die, despite the fact that they knew their children, for all intents and purposes, are immune from dying from it. It's the people, exactly what you're talking about, the people with compromised immune system. It's the immune system which matters most. If you identified people, say, that had severe diabetes or respiratory conditions or other conditions that weakened that immune system, that was the group that needed to be focused upon. What you were talking about also, not putting words in your mouth, that when you sequestered and you isolated people and you had lockdowns, you're destroying the body's ability to develop immune function, exactly what the body does, okay? So locking people down, the antithesis of what should have occurred, created much more danger and much more illness than they were trying to prevent in the first place. The last thing is this. It takes a minimum, bare minimum of 5 years to produce an effective and safe efficacy and safety vaccine. 5 years, okay? The COVID vaccine came out in less than a year and a half. okay? So the efficacy and the safety of it was absolutely categorically unknown. When you see what Maddie went through, that'll prove it. So when you talk about efficacy, safety, and vaccines, what's the primary motivation of putting these things out there way before they knew it was safe?
Well, you know, we had this theme throughout our entire discussion, and I want to kind of shift gears a little bit because there are people out there who have not been to a chiropractor, don't know much about a chiropractor, and if they talk to their medical doctor, they tend to get it kind of poo-pooed, and, you know,
That depends.
medical doctors sometimes, they don't, you know, give chiropractic any credit, okay? And so I want to talk a little bit about, you know, chiropractors, what they do,
okay,
and whether you, I mean, when I played football in high school and college, I would throw my back out constantly, and I would go to the osteopath or the chiropractor, and they would, it was like a miracle. My back felt good again, because they manipulated everything, and it just put everything back in place. What I want to know is that just what happens when you go to a chiropractor, or are there other aspects to what you do to help people? You know, if they just come to you when they're sick or when they're not feeling good, that's one thing. If they come to you to maintain a healthy lifestyle, that's something else. What do you do in your practice?
Okay, I adjust the spine. Chiropractors who know what they're doing and understand what we're supposed to do find the area which is called a vertebral subluxation. When you got blasted in football, as a matter of fact, it was a lot worse then than it is now, and you misalign the pelvis, as I say to many of my patients, if you have a 300-pound guy that's angry trying to take your head off and hit you when you're throwing a football, you better align that spine. The pro athletes get adjusted all the time. You ask what chiropractors do. We identify and remove vertebral subluxations from the spine. There's 24 mobile segments in the spine, and they move. The birth process, shoveling snow, stress will tighten up the muscles because of nerve interference, all types of reasons. We have a beautiful poster that shows the first vertebral subluxation. It shows a baby and the birth process where the cervical spine is twisted and shifts. I think the way to answer your question, best of all, is by example. What do people get when they go to the chiropractor? Chiropractors who know what they're doing, identify and remove pressure to the nervous system. That's what chiropractic is. Chiropractic is nothing more than releasing the body's electrical system so it can function normally. Anyway, I had a patient come in, and she had a 6-month-old. I don't even know if the baby was 6 months old. This happens quite often in the birth process. It's a difficult thing being born on the baby and the mother. Well, the baby had cervical torticollis. Answering your question, what is chiropractic? The baby had torticollis. Torticollis, I like to call it a super stiff neck to my patients. And the baby was sitting like this. I said, give her to me. She gave me the baby. You know how subtle I am. I adjusted the baby. The noise, which is called an audible, that cracking sound, is technically called an audible. All it is a gaseous release from the joints, and that popping. You can do the same thing with your fingers.
Right.
But the spine and the spinal vertebrae house the nervous system, central nervous system, and those nerves. I have no reason not to tell the truth. This is my 41st year in practice, okay? I've done it for a long time. And you want to hear something, Phil? The more I do it, the more I want to do it. It's amazing what happens.
And we're out of time, unfortunately, for this segment.
We just started.
I know, it was so quickly.
If I may, could you give me just a split second?
Okay.
Along with adjustments to the spine, diet is critically important, okay? Diet. Dr. Henry Beeler, who wrote a book, Food is Your Best Medicine, said the food is your best medicine from prevention and cure, okay? Exercise, walking. People ignore the great benefit of just walking, intoxicating the body. Stop taking drugs, stop intoxicating your body, and if you learn to manage stress effectively, you come on this show where there's no stress whatsoever. You know, that is the kind of thing that keeps people healthy, along with adjustments to spine. That's healthcare. That's chiropractic. It's not drugs and sick care. I thank you very much.
Dr. Gus Domenico, I thank you for being part of the conversation. It's important. It affects everybody's life. And I want to thank you for watching The Big Picture. I want to thank you for watching WBBZ-TV. We're your local station, and we really appreciate it. Do your research. There's questions that can be answered. Don't just believe everything that you hear from us. Back it up. And I highly encourage that. Thanks again to Gus, to Domenico, and we'll see you next time on The Big Picture.